Michael Jones walked into the cool air of Crestwood Bank in Denver, Colorado, adjusting his tie. The morning had been productive, and he was ready to head back to the office after running a final errand. His leather briefcase swayed as he approached the counter where a young woman named Lisa stood behind the glass, her hair neatly pinned back. "Good morning," Michael greeted, his voice calm and friendly. He slid a check and a stack of bills through the slot. "I'd like to deposit this." Lisa glanced at the check, then at Michael. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she studied him, her expression becoming more guarded. "This line is for business clients only," she said, gesturing to another line where customers waited. Michael's smile remained steady. "I'm in the right place. This is a business account deposit." Lisa's lips tightened. "I'll need to see some identification," she replied sharply. Michael hesitated, not because he minded but due to her tone, which felt accusatory. He pulled out his wallet and handed her his driver's license. Lisa examined it closely, flipping it over as though searching for signs of a forgery. "This your ID?" she asked suspiciously. Michael raised an eyebrow. "Yes." "Why?" Without responding, Lisa set the license aside and focused on the check. "Where exactly did you get this?" she asked, holding the check up like it was a criminal investigation. Michael's patience was starting to fray, but he kept his composure. "I wrote it," he said firmly. "It's from my company, Apex Capital." Lisa smirked. "And what exactly is your role there?" "I'm the CEO," Michael replied, his patience wearing thin. Lisa leaned over and pressed a button on the intercom. "Security," she said, her tone implying that there was a disturbance rather than a simple banking transaction. "I might need assistance." Michael's calm began to slip. "Is there a problem?" he asked firmly. Lisa folded her arms, her eyes locking with his. "I'm just doing my job. This check doesn't look right. Your story doesn't add up. Do you have another form of ID? Maybe a passport?" Michael stared at her, bewildered. "Who carries a passport to the bank?" Lisa's lips curved into a small smile. "I do when I travel," she said smugly. Lisa's finger hovered over the intercom button, a triumphant glint in her eyes. A tall security guard appeared moments later, scanning the room. The tension in the air was palpable as all eyes turned toward Michael. The security guard's calm voice broke the silence. "Is there an issue, Lisa?" Lisa gestured to Michael. "Yes, I suspect fraud. This gentleman handed me a check and ID that don't match, and his story doesn't add up." Michael turned to the guard, his voice steady. "There's no fraud. I'm here to deposit a check from my company account, and everything I've provided is legitimate." The security guard looked between Lisa and Michael, unsure of what to do next. His stance shifted slightly as he processed the situation. "Do you want me to call the police?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Lisa waved her hand dismissively. "Not yet. Let's confirm the check first. It's from a company called Apex Capital, and apparently he's the CEO." Michael inhaled sharply, the tone of her words stinging. "You could save us all some time by calling the number on the check," he said, keeping his voice steady. "They'll confirm everything." Lisa ignored him, pulling a second monitor closer to type in the check details. As her fingers tapped the keyboard, she glanced at Michael again. "Do you even have another form of ID? A business card? Anything that proves who you are?" Michael opened his briefcase and handed her a neatly printed business card, embossed with the Apex Capital logo and his name. She barely glanced at it before setting it aside, as if it were insignificant. "You know," Lisa said, her tone sharp, "we have policies to prevent people from scamming us. You'd be surprised how often we catch people trying to pass off fake checks. You should have thought this through better." Michael's jaw tightened, but he held his ground. "Is this how you treat all your customers, or just the ones who look like me?" he asked, his voice cutting through the tension like a sharp edge. Lisa paused, her expression faltering for just a moment before hardening again. "I'm just doing my job," she said defensively. "You're the one acting suspicious." The security guard, still standing nearby, cleared his throat. "Why don't we let her verify the check and sort this out?" he suggested, his tone neutral. Michael nodded, taking a step back. "Fine, go ahead, verify it." Lisa's fingers moved swiftly over the keyboard as she dialed the phone. Michael crossed his arms, watching her. His calm exterior hid the frustration simmering underneath. Lisa spoke into the phone, her tone clipped and professional. "Yes, this is Lisa from Crestwood Bank. I'm calling to verify a check for $20,000 issued by Apex Capital. Can I speak to someone in charge?" Michael stood silently, his face unreadable. The security guard shifted uncomfortably as the room quieted. Nearby customers pretended not to listen, though a few leaned in ever so slightly. The line rang before Lisa's expression shifted. "Yes, I'll hold," she said curtly, tapping her nails on the desk as if the wait were an inconvenience. When the line connected again, Lisa's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, Mr. Jones," she said, her tone faltering. "Yes, I have someone here trying to cash a check in your name, and I need to confirm its authenticity." Michael raised an eyebrow, tilting his head as he waited for what he knew was coming. Lisa's smugness quickly turned to confusion, then shock. Her cheeks flushed and she stammered, Yes, of course. I didn't realize. I'll thank you." She placed the phone down with a trembling hand, her gaze darting toward Michael but unable to meet his eyes. "It's all verified," she mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. At that moment, the bank manager, a composed man named Greg, stepped out of his office. Likely summoned by the commotion, Greg, the bank manager, entered the scene, quickly, scanning between Lisa, the security guard, and Michael. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone firm but calm. Lisa straightened, trying to maintain her authority. "I was just verifying a suspicious transaction," she explained quickly, "but it's all sorted now." Michael stepped forward, his voice calm yet firm. "What she means is that she falsely accused me of fraud, questioned my identity without cause, and treated me like a criminal for no reason other than her assumptions." Greg's brow furrowed as he turned to Lisa. "Is this true?" Lisa stammered, clearly flustered. I was just following protocol. It's not my fault," he seemed. Greg held up a hand to cut her off. "I'll handle this, Mr. Jones. I apologize for any inconvenience. Is there anything I can do to make this right?" Michael's gaze didn't waver. "I think you should take a closer look at how your employees treat people, because this isn't just inconvenient, it's unacceptable." Greg turned back to Lisa, his expression now stern. "Lisa, you didn't just make a mistake. You treated one of our most important clients with disrespect and prejudice." Lisa faltered. "Client?" she repeated, her voice shaking. Greg nodded, his tone unyielding. "This is Michael Jones, the CEO of Apex Capital. They're one of our largest business partners, and this bank handles millions of their transactions annually. You've just accused the owner of a fraudulent check from his own company." The color drained from Lisa's face. I didn't know," she stammered. "I was just doing my job." Michael's voice was calm but commanding. "No, you weren't doing your job. You were making assumptions based on what you saw, not what was in front of you. I gave you every piece of proof you asked for, and it still wasn't enough, because you'd already decided I didn't belong here." Lisa opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Greg exhaled sharply and turned to Michael. "Mr. Jones, on behalf of Crestwood Bank, I deeply apologize. This behavior doesn't reflect our values or the way we treat our customers." Michael studied him for a moment before nodding. "Your apology is noted, but it's your actions that matter. What will you do to ensure this doesn't happen again? Greg's gaze shifted back to Lisa. Effective immediately, Lisa. You're terminated. Her eyes widened, panic setting in. Wait, fired. You can't do that. I can, and I just did, Greg said firmly. Clear out your desk by the end of the day. Lisa's lips quivered as she looked at Michael, hoping for some kind of reprieve, but Michael's expression remained steady, offering no sympathy. The security guard stepped forward. I'll make sure she collects her things without issue, he said, his voice low. As Lisa shuffled away, Michael turned back to Greg. I appreciate your swift action, he said, his tone measured, but you still have a larger issue to address. This isn't about one employee, it's about the culture that allows this to happen. Greg nodded solemnly. You're right. We'll review our training programs and policies immediately. You have my word. As Lisa disappeared from sight, Greg motioned toward his office. Mr. Jones, please let me personally assist you with your deposit. Michael glanced around the bank, catching the uneasy stares from the other customers. He knew their curiosity wasn't from malice, but the moment still hung heavy with the weight of what had transpired. He nodded at Greg and followed him, briefcase in hand, inside the office. Greg processed the transaction with precision, offering occasional reassurances that this would never happen again. When the deposit was complete, he leaned forward slightly, his tone earnest. Mr. Jones, I can't apologize enough for what happened today. It was unacceptable. Michael regarded him calmly. Apologies are important, Greg, but they're not the solution. What matters is making sure this doesn't happen to someone else, someone who might not have the resources or the position to defend themselves. Greg nodded solemnly. We'll take action. That's a promise. Michael stood, slipping his receipt into his briefcase. He paused at the door, turning back. And one more thing. Educate your team. A lesson on respect and equality can go further than firing someone. Greg straightened, his expression resolute. Understood. As Michael stepped back into the main lobby, he paused. He wasn't one to make speeches, but the room felt different now, quieter, more reflective. The customers who had witnessed the incident were still watching, their curiosity now tinged with something else. Respect, perhaps, or shame. Don't judge someone by how they look, Michael said, his voice steady but loud enough to carry. You might be looking at the very person who could change your life. He gave a small, polite nod to the onlookers and walked out of the bank. The sunlight greeted him like an old friend. Outside, he stood for a moment, taking in the fresh air. His frustration from earlier had shifted into something more productive, a determination to keep pushing boundaries, not just for himself, but for everyone who'd ever been doubted or overlooked. Inside, Greg called a staff meeting. Lisa's empty chair at the front desk would remain a silent reminder of the change that needed to happen. Not just at Crestwood Bank, but in every corner of society where assumptions still outweighed understanding.